Lifeboat Live. We have 4 simple rules. Number 1, we don't discuss politics. Ever. Number 2, this is not a religious channel, and while you might hear people say, God bless you, or I'm going to pray for you, or I wouldn't have gotten through this without my faith, that's fine. What's not fine is to say, my God is better than your God, or here's why you're not getting into heaven. It's not going to fly. Number 3, we believe wholeheartedly if you can't control your tongue, then you can't control your life. So while on board, there's not going to be any cursing in the live chat. Period. And number 4, there is no room for mean people on the lifeboat. Because we discuss very sensitive things from people's past in our group setting, we got to protect those people. The only way they feel confident and comfortable discussing those things is in an environment that is free of trolls and mean people. So if you're a mean person or you're a troll, we're going to block you for life. And if your account happens to be less than 24 hours old, we're probably a little suspicious right from the word go. Why? Well, because there are people in this world who enjoy being cruel solely for the sake of being cruel. It's not going to fly here. But if you're here because you're trying to get sober and live your best life, then you might find that the lifeboat is just that, a lifeboat. I'm Captain Tommy Scoville, and we will see you on deck. Hey everybody, I'm Captain Tommy Scoville, and you are on the lifeboat. I had the volume up on my other device here. I had to turn that down. I'm a professional. Don't try this at home. People, if you live in another country, you may be unaware that today is Groundhog Day. And this is you've probably seen the movie, but if you haven't seen the movie, it is a time here in the United States every February 2nd, going back to 1887, in a little town in Pennsylvania called Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. They have the Groundhog Festival. And what happens is a little groundhog by the name of Punxsutawney Phil comes out of a little hollowed out tree. It's got a door on it. And he either sees his shadow or he does not. If he sees his shadow, we get an additional 6 weeks of winter. If he does not, then summer comes a little bit quicker. In lies the theory. And today, as it turns out, Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow. And if you talk to Mark, he'll tell you that Punxsutawney Phil is probably one of the better weathermen going these days, because it's looking like 6 more weeks of winter, to be sure. Excuse me. But in the last decade and a half, Groundhog Day has taken on an entirely new meaning. The reason is it was a great film done starring Bill Murray. And the principle of the film is that he goes as a weatherman to cover the Groundhog Festival in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, and gets into some kind of a time warp thing where every single morning when he wakes up, it's the same day. He wakes up again and again and again to the same alarm clock going off and playing I Got You, Babe over and over again. And I saw a great documentary on the making of the movie, and they asked the director how long the character spent in the, so if you're a fan of the film, you might enjoy this. The director said 33 years. Over the course of the film, he spent 33 years waking up and living the exact same day. And I'll tell you something, I think I did longer than that, which is kind of remarkable. But I think there are a great many parallels between that film and the life of the addict. There is something about drug and alcohol addiction that causes us to be in a never-ending loop. We basically live the same thing over and over again. And you will hear people these days use the term Groundhog Day as a way now of describing something where you're just doing the same thing every single day. It is the film has had such an impact on popular culture that in these days, if you say, oh man, I'm living Groundhog Day, and no longer has anything to do with Phil and his shadow, it has come to mean you're trapped in a never-ending loop. And the thing is, people, there are parallels, obviously, as I said, to to what this means for those of us in recovery or prior to recovery, even more so. But on top of that, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go on a rant. And I do this from time to time, but there's no getting around it, because as I started to prepare to do this video, I realized that not only is Groundhog Day happening for people who are still in the addiction cycle, people who are still living in the life, but it's also happening to the world, and most assuredly to this country. We're in a perpetual Groundhog Day. You've heard me say this so many times, but today 300 people are going to die of drug overdoses, give or take, but right around on average 300 people today are going to die of drug overdoses. And tomorrow, like it didn't happen, 300 more. The following day, 300 more. And we really have become locked in this cycle. And on the border, they're going to be busting people coming across the border with drugs. And the next day, they're going to bust more. And the next day, they're going to bust more. And nevertheless, metric tons of this stuff are getting into our country. And these days, there's more fentanyl coming across the border than there is heroin. That's a first for 2021. And it is even more dramatic here in 2022. And I promise you, people, that means that next year when we're having this conversation, I'm not going to be talking about 300 people a day who are passing away from drug overdoses. In fact, we're going to look back on that as the good old days, because what is coming with fentanyl and with some of the newer street drugs that are coming across that are actually stronger than fentanyl, if you can wrap your brain around that. But it got me thinking, and unfortunately, a lot of times when I think about this subject, I start doing a little research, and I always go back and look at the statistics because they update them quite regularly. And the statistics, people, about the Groundhog Day effect that is happening in our country. Now, for those of you who are watching in other countries, bear with me, because I promise you, this is just, we're a microcosm, right? We make up about 4% of the population of the planet here in the United States of America. So wherever you're at, you're probably going through the exact same thing, maybe a little bit worse, maybe not quite as bad, but the entire world is suffering from this affliction. And I wanted to give you some statistics here in the United States. Since they started, air quotes, right? Since they started what they call the opiate epidemic. And I promise you, people, that it was going on before they started talking about it. But since they started talking about the opiate epidemic and keeping statistics on it, which was in the year 2000, we have lost 700,000 people in the United States to drug overdoses from opiates. 700,000. 20% of Americans, 12 or over, have used drugs in the last year. 1 out of 5. Now, if you add in alcohol and tobacco and consider both of those drugs, then there are 165 million, or 60.29% of America have used in the last 30 days. I want to say that again. If you talk about addicting chemicals in this country and include tobacco and alcohol, and tobacco use is on the decline, by the way, but if you lump all of that together, then 60% of this country have used in the last 30 days. Now, 139.8 million Americans 12 years and older use alcohol on a regular basis. There's 330 million people in this country. 139.8 million of them, 12 and up, are using alcohol on a regular basis. 14.8 million of those are considered hopelessly addicted, or what they call alcohol use disorder. Those aren't people who, report that they consider that they don't have a problem because they drink only 6 beers a day or things of that nature. These are people who admit and say, oh, I got a problem. Like, I very seriously have an issue with this. 31.9 million people in this country use illegal drugs daily. That's more than 10% of the country, right? Who are using illicit drugs every single day. I find that terrifying. 8.1 million of those, or 25%, are considered hopelessly addicted. 2 million are addicted to opioids. Now, keep in mind, people, these statistics are people that admit to this. What is the number one thing that we know about drug addiction? Right? They say, what's the first thing that you notice? It's going to be denial. These are people who step up to the plate and say yes to these questionnaires when they're filled out. Now, obviously, they don't ask 330 million Americans. They do a certain number in every single state. Then they put it into the computer. The algorithm spits this out. It's not even close. I promise you, these statistics aren't even in the ballpark of accurate. But even in the form that they just took, they're terrifying. We're trapped in a Groundhog Day. And I have been known to spend 50 minutes or so just going off on a rant about this. For those who are new to the lifeboat, 300 people a day, 2.3 people in a house, that's 120 homes a day that empty of all of the people living in them every single day in this country. The other day, I started counting houses in the development that I live in. It would clean out the entire development in a day. That's the number of people who are going to overdose and die today in this country. We are not a channel. You heard my little spiel in the beginning here. We don't talk about politics. I have always said right from the very beginning, the only time that I will ever bring up politics is if it overlaps with what we talk about. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, because none of them are doing squat about it. There's no problem whatsoever lambasting every single political party because none of them care. And people, that gets us back to why we're here. It gets us back to why Mark and I felt the need to start the lifeboat, to get this underway, because those people who are deemed responsible, those people who are elected and given the responsibility of making sure these kind of things don't happen, don't care in any way, shape, or form. In fact, you will hear people say things like, this is natural selection. This is the thinning of the herd, right? This is basically, this is Darwinism at its best. Those people who are going to use drugs are going to overdose and die. What they don't realize is, and I find it almost humorous, but you'll hear people in Congress talk like this. And these are people that weigh 295 pounds and are smoking cigarettes and drinking beer all day. You know, addiction is okay as long as it's their addiction. Addiction is okay as long as what it is they're doing, that's fine. But those people who do something illegal, or those people who can't control what they do, you see, there are a great number of people on the planet who think that as long as you show up at work and as long as you get what you get, need to get done, well, then there's not a problem. And if, 5 or 10 times a month, you need to do a little bit of blow and stay up a little late so that you can get the bill written or you can do whatever. People, if you don't believe that this is the case, there are some things that just jump out at you. For instance, for the longest period of time, crack cocaine carried a sentence that was 10 times worse. So if you got caught with a gram of crack, you would do 10 times more time than you would if you got caught with a gram of cocaine. Now, since it takes the gram of cocaine to make the gram of crack, how is this even possible, right? Well, the bottom line is you had people sitting around going, yeah, that crack stuff's terrible. Finish writing that law. I'm not kidding. If the number of lawyers I've met in my life that snort cocaine is unbelievable. But again, one person's addiction versus another person's addiction. What we have going on here is an entire society of rulers who have made the decision that we're expendable. They've made the decision that all of the people who occupy the lifeboat and the 60% of this country that probably should be on the lifeboat, they don't matter. So I am thankful that all of you are here. I feel blessed that all of you care enough about one another to reach out when someone hasn't made a couple of shows in a row, and take the time to make sure that people are just doing all right. Because the fact is, if we don't do it, I promise you no one else is going to. All right, so that's my rant. I made a decision at the beginning of this. I was going to try to keep it as short as possible. Mark's laughing on the other side of the glass because he knows that I could do this for 2 hours. And when I really get going, I talk so fast and I start screaming it. I'm not going to do that, I promise. If you want to see one of the other rants, there's plenty of them. But the Groundhog Effect of addiction is something that every single person on this channel can relate to. If you think about just the nature of addiction, it is doing the same thing over and over and over again. just by nature of what it means to be addicted, right? You need a substance, you need a drink, you need a chemical, and you need it every single day. And then, unfortunately, what happens with most people is there is a ritual that is involved with almost every addiction. So for me, by the end of my addiction, it required a lot of stealing just to continue to get my habit going. So I would get up in the morning, and the Groundhog Day would start. It was a matter of going out, breaking the law, doing what I had to do to come up with $600 or $700, then making the phone call, then parking in one of 3 or 4 parking lots and waiting for the person to make the delivery. I've said this on here before, but there have been studies done that say that people who are addicted to illicit drugs spend almost 30% of their life waiting for those drugs to be delivered, sitting in parking lots, waiting at your house, whatever the situation is, but waiting for somebody just to show up and drop off the chemical that you need to get through the day. And this is a cycle that becomes so difficult to break out of. And here's where it gets crazy. One of the things that makes this cycle so difficult to break out of is the simplicity of it. And I think this is something that, unless you've lived this life, this is not something that can make any sense to anyone. If you try to explain addiction to someone who has never used, they look at you like you're crazy. I remember my parents saying to me, you know exactly what's going to happen if you do this. You're going to get into that cycle. You're going to get arrested. You're probably going to wind up going back to prison. Why would you ever do it again? Well, obviously, no one in their right mind would. So it gets back to the people who are addicted are not in their right mind. But the simplicity of the lifestyle is just as addicting as the substance. When we break out of that addiction and we start living our best life, we start living a life, like Mark says, that's real, right? You feel the emotions that are going on, and you're not drugging them. You're not putting them to sleep. You're not tranquilizing yourself. Well, there's a lot to worry about, isn't there? Think of all of the different things that now are part of your life. I got bills, right? I've got insurance. I've got all of these things that just were not an issue before. Before there was only a couple of issues. Either I was in the process of getting high, or I was breaking the law to come up with the money to make sure that I could get high. And there was nothing else to it. There were no responsibilities. There was no guilt, right? There was also no joy. But you convince yourself that, when the powder goes up your nose, or the liquid goes in your vein, or whatever it is you're doing, you convince yourself that there's joy in that. And the reason that happens is because the malfunctioning reward center of our brain, which we talk about all the time, gives you just enough feel-good chemicals for doing the wrong thing, that as the drug starts to come in, you get the euphoria. The euphoria, believe it or not, folks, most of that has nothing to do with the drug. Most of that is just in your brain. And when you see interviews with people like Alan Ballantyne, or you see interviews with any of the other people that we've done who got back on the right track, everybody has a story. You remember the story of there was a guy on the lifeboat, a boy who went to rehab. He actually called us from rehab. He was drinking, he would fill a water bottle every day, a 16-ounce water bottle every day with vodka. And he was drinking 16 ounces of vodka every single day. He said he'd been doing it for years. And he talked about the look of disappointment in his father's face. And that of all of the things that happened, how crestfallen he was when his dad came to the realization that his son was an addict. People, the opposite of that. The first time that, like Alan Ballantyne said, he just got back from a vacation where he spent time with his mother and father, and looked at their eyes and saw admiration. And you know what happens? The same flood of chemicals that used to happen when you would get that crap in your hand, or you would walk into the store and pick up the 6-pack to go buy it. That same rush of chemicals that make everything feel good. The difference is that lasts. Whether or not you realize it, that first initial, oh man, thank goodness I got this in my hand. What do we immediately do? We use it. And in doing so, that feel-good chemical in your brain gets completely overloaded by whatever the next substance is. That's why people who are addicted, you chase that initial rush, you chase that initial high, because as soon as the drug hits, you're drugged. The part of your brain that should be feeling good gets put to sleep. And depending on the substance, you do coke, you get a little wired, but that feel good, that real euphoria that your brain creates is over fast. And when you lay out the next line, your brain isn't going up, let's do it again and flush more chemicals out. It really is a very short-lived thing. When you can get that back on track, when you can start getting the reward center of your brain to release endorphins and release all of those feel-good chemicals for the right reasons, a really amazing thing happens. You begin to live your best life. That's a fact. I'm telling you, people. If I know when I talk to people who are just getting ready to quit, or people who have, they've been clean and sober for 20 days or 30 days, I get the question all the time, when am I going to start feeling good again? It's one of those things that you hear all of the time. And you know what, people, it does take a minute. But if you think that Mark's made it 11 years or I've made it 6.5 because we've been white knuckling it the whole time, waiting for the good stuff to start, people, I would not have made 6.5 years. I promise you it's not what I was made of. It's just now, I've never been that guy. I've been the guy that ran back every single time. But once it starts, once the real begins to take hold, and I'm not sitting here going to tell you right now that it's all going to be great. I'm just going to tell you it's all going to be real. People, had I been in the previous incarnation of Tommy, when Cindy died, it wouldn't have affected me. I'm just being honest, it wouldn't have. Doesn't mean I wouldn't have been able to come on and make it look like it did, because that's kind of who I was. And as bad as it is, it's real. That pain, and as the pain started to subside, I was left with some really beautiful memories, some very, very funny things that Cindy wrote me. And I'll tell you what, I've gone back and I've read those emails probably 8 times now. That's something else that never would have happened. I just would have moved on to the next fix. And all of the important things that are now happening in my life, the little minutia, the small day-to-day things that I take joy in, and the small day-to-day things that sometimes frustrate me, and then I take joy in getting through. That's life. Air quotes. That's what normal people do. That's what people who are not addicted to drugs do. They celebrate the victories in life, flooded with feel-good chemicals. They get high on their own life. And then when the tough stuff comes, their brain rewards them for getting through it. If you don't believe that's the case, people, go out on a limb and give yourself 6 months. Stay sober for 6 months and watch what starts to happen. Watch what happens as your brain starts doing the right thing. Because I want to tell you something, it's magic. It really is. It's magic. And we spend a lot of time on the lifeboat talking about the way that you have to overcome certain things. And the reality is, when you first get sober, you're going to spend some time bummed out. And for that reason, we tend to lean on that. And I don't want, for any reason, for anybody to think it's just going to be wine and roses and smiles and sunshines and puppies. It's not. But I also don't want to spend the entire time focused on, just the tough. Because I'm telling you that today, it really is the best of the best. It is. Even the stuff that I find difficult, it's worth every single moment of it. Because once you get by that, once you get through the struggles in life, you're going to find yourself the happiest incarnation of you that could possibly be. I also want to do a shout out to all of the new people that we have on the boat. I always say, if you're new to the boat, please reach out. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And it's something that we like to do because when I look out over the crew, I like to know who's out there. Hold on one second. Like the guy, I've been in a dark place for a long time. Last year, I lost 9 people. I'll be 40 July 18th. I shared my story on Facebook Lifeboat. I accepted him into the lifeboat today, but he reached out to me, sent me an email, said, you know what, I want to join the group. It's been nothing short of amazing to watch you guys come over from Wages World. I know we get the benefit of the fact that it really is. And you hear this, you're going to hear this said a lot, but there's a lot of this that goes on, right? There's a lot of overlap. So there's a lot of people when Mark does space weather, you're going to see a bunch of people from the lifeboat over there. And a lot of us end up over on Mark Pyers. It does become a little sort of a little circle of family that all hang out. But that's one thing that'll get you all to a channel. But just the way that you all sort of got here and started to share, like the guy talking right now, opening up and talking about things that are going on in your life is really when this channel's at its best, is when people come here and unload for real. People, one of the things that makes sobriety manageable is the fact that you do not do it alone. It's the reason that in the 1930s, a couple of drunks, no disrespect, they weren't addicts, they were drunks. These were guys that could not get through the day without drinking before 10 a.m. They were guys that really abused alcohol, and they found the answer that no one else could. And the reason is that, as I said earlier, if we don't care for one another, no one else is going to. The fact that you come here and as you're struggling, you let that out. If you don't let it out, how many times have we made this joke on the lifeboat? No one has ever gone to a psychiatrist or a psychologist or been through any kind of therapy and had the person that they were working with said, here's what you want to do. Make sure you don't talk about this. Make sure you don't share this. Just put it away in the back of your mind as long as you can. Just bury that stuff because you'll get better. Right? Said absolutely no one. But it's what we do, isn't it? It is, especially when we're new to recovery. We're so used to society. You know what I mean? Society. I heard a guy joke about this on the radio the other day. A person said on the radio, there's nothing worse than asking someone how they're doing and having them tell you. And I thought, what an awful thing for someone to say. It really is an awful thing for someone to say, but it's something that we've all dealt with, isn't it? No one wants to hear exactly what it is that you have to say. I'm in the process of mourning the person that I was before, and I have issues looking in the mirror. Angel, do you know how many people on the lifeboat have uttered that phrase in the comment section while Mark and I have been doing this? Seriously, Mark, how many times have we heard somebody say, you know what, I can't stand the mirror. I promise you, Angel, that's going to get better. I promise you, that's going to get better. I went through it. And it's difficult to look in the mirror. You know why? Because when you look in the mirror right now, you're seeing the person you used to be. And what I'm going to tell you is that a day is coming in the very near future when you look in the mirror, you're going to be proud of the reflection looking back at you. And when that happens, mirrors become really cool. I'm not joking. In fact, you almost go through a period of vanity. I think I was probably about a year and a half in and I'll tell you something, every mirror that I looked at a year and a half in wasn't a mirror. It was a hammered piece of metal, because the mirrors could be broken and used as weapons. I was incarcerated. So I looked at buffed and polished pieces of metal that for the most part had enough scratches on them where you could barely make out your own face. But every once in a while you would go by and see something that would really give you a genuine reflection. And I would find myself stopping. It happened all the time. And not because I'm handsome, but because for the first time in my life, I was looking at a guy that was clean, that was sober, that had shaved, that had made his bed. Boy, if you're new to this channel, you're going to get sick of hearing me say that. But I start every day by making my bed. And it's a thing. And for me, it's a big thing. It kicks off, the fact that the person that just did that spent 35 years. I probably made my bed a dozen times in 35 years. And it's usually if my mom was coming to visit. You know what I mean? It was one of those kind of situations where I wasn't going to let the place look really bad if I had somebody coming over. But I didn't make the bed. And you know what it did? It kicked off the entire day for me. I wasn't going to do anything else that I should do. It was just the nature of who I was. I was going to brush my teeth when I got around to it, but I probably wasn't going to do it right then. Now I get up in the morning, I make my bed, I brush my teeth. It's the first two things that I do. It may sound really silly, but it is a declaration. This is the new Tommy. For those of you who are new on the boat, I didn't do the 12-step program the way other people do it. I had been to 12-step groups. I do not badmouth them. In fact, I brag about them regularly. But for me, everybody there was court ordered, and there were people in there that I knew, and they were all high. And I blew 2 good runs of sobriety in the parking lot of an NA meeting, and I vowed I would never go back. But when I decided I really wanted to get sober, I was in prison and I worked with a lifer, or I should say, he worked with me, a black guy doing life by the name of Q. And the reason I mentioned he's black is because in prison, blacks and whites aren't allowed to talk in federal prison. Like, you just can't hang out. It's not one of those things. It really is considered just not done. But this guy did not let that bother him. And he took an interest in me. And he asked me to make a list of all of the reasons I wanted to quit, called it my why page. And I filled it out. I put things down like my parents and my kids, and I was tired of being sick, and I was tired of having to run, and I was tired of the chase. I was tired of always having to find it in order to be right every single day of my life for decades and decades. And the second page, he said, write down every single thing about you. And, I've told the story on here so many times, but I came back and I handed it to him and he goes, what is this? I said, those are all of the things about me, man. He's like, no. This is going to take days. He's like, you need to be honest. I want all of it. And it was really funny because page 3, Tommy, I just basically took everything from page 2 and said, I don't want to be this, and went right down the list. I don't want to be a liar. I don't want to be a con man. I don't want to be a thief, right? I want my word to mean something. All of the things that I listed that were wrong with me on page 2, I intended to fix on page 3. And one of the things that I wrote down was, I don't ever do the things that other people do. I don't make my bed. And I remember Q saying to me, first thing you do, man, this is easy. This is how you start right here, right now. This is how you start. Don't ever get up in the morning and not make your bed, and make that thing better than everybody else. Sounds stupid, right? Really does. But I was in prison. How much room was there to differentiate myself from the people around me? Well, I was going to do whatever I did better than other people. Plain and simple. It was all I had. Now that I'm out, there's a lot of things that I can do that says to the world, this is who I am. In there, it was about hygiene. I could keep myself cleaner than the next guy, and I could make sure that my cell was cleaner than the next guy. It was about all I could do, but I did it. And I didn't watch television. I read books. Exclusively. It's not a brag thing. But these were things that the other guy didn't do. The previous Tommy didn't do these things. And I have found very successfully that if when you decide to get sober, you say, here's what I used to do. I ain't doing any of that anymore. Here's what I'm going to do now. Mark calls it creating new memories. One of the things that we wrestle with is that the old memories, right, create automatic negative thoughts, ants that crawl over your brain. So you better start creating new memories quick. Right? As fast as possible. So I redesigned my life. And you know what? I dig it. I really do. I love it. So by the time I got out of that hellhole and I could feel things like wind on my face and rain and things like that, I appreciated all of them. I really did. One of the other things is I wasn't going to sleep until 11 o'clock ever again. Seriously. I had to see math. That was the time that I would sleep till 11 o'clock. I don't do that. I don't have enough time left on this planet to waste any more of it. One of the other defining characteristics of addiction is we waste ungodly amounts of time. Like we were just talking about earlier, sitting in parking lots waiting for drugs to be delivered, right? Or getting high and just sitting on a couch. There's that. That's fun, right? That's the things we did for fun. Drug your brain and sit in one spot for 4 hours until you can drug your brain some more. Looking back on it, people, it's the dumbest thing in the entire world. If you tried to explain it to me now, I would say to you, this is what you do for grins. This is fun. Find something you're passionate about. I don't care what it is, but start to live your life. And you know all of the cliches, people. You need to find different people, different places, and different things, right? You can't associate with the same people in the same places, doing the same things and think you're not going to go right back to exactly what you were doing. You need to make some changes. And if you do it right, it's a heck of a lot of fun. It is. If you think that page 2 Tommy would have done this, would have taken an hour every single day out of my life to sit in front of a camera and talk to people who likely I'm not going to meet, right? At least face to face. This isn't something you could have talked me into. Even if you rewarded me with a bag of dope, I don't think I would have done this. But I've become addicted to it. And you know what? When I get emails from people that say the crew of the boat has done so much for me, my brain goes, and releases those feel-good chemicals. And it does it more. Mark and I have had this discussion so many times. When you see somebody truthfully turn their life around, there's not another buzz out there like it. And I've tried all of them, but there's nothing else like helping somebody, genuinely helping somebody for no other reason than that they need help. That's really what it is. I'm sorry, people, I'm just checking. You know what? We're probably up to that time anyway. This is usually the time on the lifeboat where I kick it over to my bobbleheaded partner. If you're new here, I'm not picking on him with the bobbleheaded partner, but we're on the same page with so many things that we talk about, that so oftentimes as I'm talking, Mark's doing this one. And although you people don't see him, I do, with a really big screen right in front of me, and he nods and nods and nods. If he's not trying to make me laugh, which does happen from time to time, that's what he's doing. Mark, how are you today?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Good.
Yep. Just waiting on this, of course, like 3/4 of the country now waiting on all this bad weather. But yeah, that's beside the point. I want to say thanks to Raven tonight. She's been in there really just dropping some good stuff, helping some people in there. So thank you, Raven, for that. And anybody, like I said, anybody that is new here, that's exactly what you're going to get. Okay? It doesn't have to come from me or Tommy. As a matter of fact, typically, we can get the topic and stuff going, but usually it takes on a life of its own there in the chat and gets said a lot better than I could ever say it. And that's, it's just great. But yeah, it is. It's a, you said recreating memories earlier, like I say that a lot. And I do think that's key, because in essence, what you're doing is you're taking something that would trigger you to think of something bad, and you're associating it with a new thing, which would be something good. So instead of triggering you to go to a bad place, it may even start to trigger you to go to a good place. And that's why I think it's important to do those kinds of things, because you do seriously need to try to replace those memories. Because if that's all you've got in your head about any kind of situation, like, I always use Christmas because that's a big thing for people, right? I mean, at least here in the Western world, that's a big deal. And so many times, for however many years you were addicted, you were high. And with that being said, it gets you stuck in the same day over and over and over again. That's a country song, I get it, but yeah, that's what's happening. And seriously, that is exactly what happened. And you're going to find a lot of stuff we say here does sound a little cliche, but it's the truth. That's the reason it's a cliche. That's just the way that it is. And, if we can't get ourselves to a point in our head where we can allow ourselves to feel good about things again, then you've already lost. That should be almost one of the first goals. We've talked about this past week with guilt and commitment and all that kind of thing. That guilt is probably the worst thing that creeps in, because we don't allow ourselves to feel the good, because we're guilty. We feel guilty about doing that. We don't think that we're worthy enough, So what happens is we go back to the other word commitment. Then we start breaking commitments again. And that's how that cycle gets started. And I'm sure everybody listening to me that has ever tried to get clean or sober, whatever you want to call it, has experienced that. And you will continue to experience it. And, Angel's been in there talking about, looking in the mirror, and you talked about that for a second there too. And yeah, guys, eventually, I promise you, when you look in that mirror, eventually you're going to start to see good things. Because what are you doing? You are doing it day after day after day. And again, another cliche, actions speak louder than words. We can say it all day long, but unless you're going to act on what you're saying, it's just not going to do anything for you. And I hate to say it like that, but it's just the truth. There's nothing else to say. And then when you do commit, you try not to break that. And that's how you keep from getting stuck in that Groundhog Day. If you commit to something, do everything you can to stick to that. Don't commit to it if you're not, because all that will do is lead to more guilt. If you commit to something and you break a commitment, what happens? You start feeling guilty again, because you don't want to be that person. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Hey, I want to be a drug addict," or "Hey, I want to go be an alcoholic and make my family miserable." Nobody ever says that kind of crap, and that's where the guilt comes in, because we did it anyway, right? That is exactly what happened. We did it anyway. And that's why that we have to get our minds to a point. And let me say something here too. It's not going to happen overnight. It is going to be a process. You're going to have to prove it, not just to your family, but you're going to have to prove it to yourself. So those actions that you're doing, when you're looking in that mirror, you're proving it to yourself. When you do that, you're analyzing who you are at that second. And if you can say, "Hey, yesterday I didn't, I didn't go use," or, "Hey, I took a different way home so I wouldn't have to look at this because I was trying to avoid a trigger." All these little things, they add up to stuff, just like the bad stuff will, add up to things and become really, really bad. You can do the same thing with the good stuff. And that's the goal, We're not just trying to be sober here. We're trying to live our best life. And that's how you do it. I know it's basic or whatever, there's a lot more explanation there, but that is.
No, I think that's pretty good stuff.
And if you, and again, it really will help you get and stay out of the Groundhog Day cycle. Because for however long I was addicted, I can tell you that I lived the same life, the same day over and over and over and over again. It really was. You'd wake up, go chase it. As soon as I take the medicine, chase it again. Before I even, it was just, yeah. And then you guys know this, most of you guys do. You don't even enjoy it. The high that you get off of it. It happens so fast in your brain that it's just like what Tommy was saying earlier. Because now you're counting on that chemical to make you feel that way. And when that chemical stops and shuts that part of your brain down, then you're going to have to try to figure a way to get that again. And that's why that chase becomes, just, it's relentless. That's what I'll say about it. Because it is the worst part of addiction that for me. I hated that. And, and looking back on it, you look back on things you did and you're like, "Yeah, I fooled that guy." No, you didn't. Everybody around you knew what was going on but you. And you think you had it all under control. And I hate using the term functioning, addict and stuff like that, because that's not really a great term to use. But a lot of us are kind of, if we just want to use their definition for that, a lot of us were. Right? So what that did was it made us think that we were getting away with something. We were lying to people every day. Every day. Probably the same person you'd lie to 10 times a day. And, that right there itself, when you finally get into recovery, that specific fact that you lied to people is enough to get you back into that nasty mind thought of guilt. You have to be able to forgive yourself, and you have to allow yourself to get rid of that guilt. You're not that person anymore. You're not.
Bingo.
Not.
Bingo. Yeah, and if you missed that last night, people, this is not a mind game to make it easier for you to forgive yourself. It really comes down to one thing. You can ask yourself the questions: who in their right mind would do X, Y, and Z? Whatever it is you were doing, who in their right mind would do this? And the answer logically is no one in their right mind would do that. So it gets you wondering, if you weren't in your right mind, exactly what were you? All right. Well, you were struggling in a very serious mental illness. No matter how you shake it, addiction is not normal. It really isn't. It is a defect. What's going on in the brain is not normal. And if you want to beat yourself up for what's going on in your head when you're not functioning normally, that's not logical. I mean, it really isn't. And I know it's hard. Trust me. I ended up in federal prison. I robbed banks. Looking back on the things that I've done, but I promise you that wasn't me. And I got a couple other comments I got to jump on. Keith, my brother, your manhood is not attached to what you do for a living. Your manhood is not attached to any of that. You know what makes a man? Your word, your conscience, your heart, your soul, right? Love. Those are the things that define your manhood. It's not what you do for a living. It's not any of those things. Really. I have seen people go to prison and melt. And I have seen people go to prison and become a man, right? And a stand-up cat in the worst place on the planet. Also, to the guy, he said that he wasn't able to come here sober this evening. If you're new to the lifeboat and you haven't heard this before, we do not kick people off of the lifeboat because they used before they got here. We don't judge you for using before you got here. All of us spent a large portion of our lives using. The fact that you're here says that you probably don't want to keep doing what you're doing, and that's fine. It is. Just keep coming back. You know, sometimes it takes a couple of shows. Sometimes it takes a couple of months, but eventually there's going to be something you hear or something you read or somebody in the comment section that says something to you, and a light bulb is going to go off, and you're going to say, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Angel, I am glad that you are here. I really am. Welcome to the lifeboat. You're in the right place. I promise you that. You're in the right place. As far as the guilt goes, it's a process. But I know that everybody has seen Saturday Night Live, right? And you've all seen Stuart Smalley. He's in several 12-step programs. He's not a counselor. He sits in front of a mirror and he says, I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And doggone it, people like me. You don't like mirrors? Don't look at them. Seriously, till you start feeling better, don't look at them. Just blow them off. But start saying to yourself as a mantra every single morning, I'm a good person. The person that used to be is gone. That's not me. Seriously, if you have to chant it in the shower, that guy ain't me. Because I'll tell you something, the Tommy that used to be, that's not me. That's not me. The reason that I can cope with the things that I've done is because that was not me. And I'm not making that up. I'm telling you wholeheartedly, that wasn't me. That was heroin. Plain and simple. That was heroin. That was opiates. Every decision I made was made by opiates. I didn't make them. Believe it. I would not walk away from my kids. I would not turn my back on my friends. I certainly wouldn't steal from my family. Heroin would. And when that stuff was at the helm, I had absolutely no control over what I was doing in life. I would steal your wallet fast, and then I would spend a couple hours helping you look for it. That's the cat I was, but that was not me. I was a drug-induced psychosis, truthfully. I mean, there's a reason that they call it an opiate use disorder. So there's a reason they call it alcohol abuse disorder. It's a damn disorder. Your brain isn't working right when you're under the influence. So if you want to beat yourself up over the things that you've done, but I'll tell you something, now the precious starts to build for real, because as of right now, you know this, right? Now, if you start making decisions to continue in the life, yeah, the guilt's going to get different. The more you realize that the drugs are at the helm and the drugs are making decisions and the drugs are ruining your life and ruling your life. If you continue to let them do so, you're going to get automatic positive thoughts. I'm not kidding. You're going to start getting thoughts of, man, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be doing, I know better. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And they will start crawling all over your brain. Listen to those. I know it's another cliche, but if you don't think that there's a little angel on one shoulder and a little devil on the other, people, that is such a great cartoon. You know, that was an old Warner Brothers that first started that thing, and it's perfect because it's just so true. There are two voices that are always going in your head, and they're always battling. Which one are you going to listen to? If you go way back, and I mean way back, we did a show called "Which Wolf Are You Going to Feed?" Is that what it was called? Something like that. But Yeah, I use an old Indian illustration. Maybe I'll do it again tomorrow night. I haven't pulled it out in a long time. But the question is, and what it boils down to is, there is a positive and a negative going on in your life at all times. At all times. There is a good and there is a bad. And the one that you give the most time to is going to win. Plain and simple. If you spend more of your day thinking about the fact that you want to be sober, you're going to be. You spend more of your day romanticizing about getting high, trust and believe you will. Plain and simple, you're going to get high. Just how it works.
Exactly. I mean, and I think that, there's a lot of good conversation going on here in the chat. And I just want to say hi to Salinity. I haven't seen. I believe it's a girl. I'm not sure. But yeah, said she was sober for 11 years, and December she kind of fell, and I guess she's back on it now.
Good for her.
Yes, that's great stuff, guys, and I think that those kinds of things. I would point this out, that no matter how much longer you have on this planet, it doesn't matter if you've been in recovery for 30 years. You still got to guard yourself against that stuff. Okay? And I know that it's not going to be in your mind every day, the further and further you get away from it. I understand that because I've experienced that myself. But this is why what we're doing here is important, because this allows us to gain the tools to be able to recognize and then to fight back against that when it does hit. Because it will. That'll happen. I think she said she had a bad year. Okay, and again, we all get bad times. I don't pretend to know anybody's situation, right? That's another reason why we don't judge people here, because we don't know the full situation. We never will. But we're here because we care. We're here because we've been that road. We've done all that. And I have to say this too. There is an accountability level that we all have to live up to. To ourselves, mainly. That's the first person you need to hold yourself accountable to, and that's to yourself. And what I mean by that is, if you say you're going to do it, do it. If you're not going to do it, if you already know you're not going to do it, then just don't even say it. Because all it's going to do is bring the guilt back on the other end of it. And, and let me say this too. All of us are going to have bad times. Really, really bad times. Nobody's immune from that. That is not. And I don't want this to sound like really, really bad or anything, but it's not an excuse to go out and use. Don't let that get into your mind thought. I'm not saying that you can't have a weak moment and that happens, but to condone that and to just focus on that is not the right thing to do. You need to try to, pick up these tools that we've learned throughout our lives and throughout our recovery to try to do that. Now, again, like I said, people are going to make mistakes. I get that. But when you start making excuses for yourself and you keep saying it over and over and over again, that means that you've already relapsed in your mind. Already, 100%. And this is a good place to come when that happens, because it could keep you from physically relapsing. If you don't want to be here, go to a group somewhere. Go to a good friend, something. Don't just sit there and hold on to that. Go get that out into the ether. Speak it to somebody else. Okay? Because if you don't, it's not going to work. It just won't. You're going to hold that in, and all those bad things are going to start happening to you again. So, yeah, and again, I'm not trying to be a downer here on that, or a hardcore whatever, but that's a fact, guys. It's one thing me and Tommy aren't going to do is come up here and just, walk around on eggshells because we don't want to, offend somebody or anything like that. We're not going to be mean, but we're going to tell you the truth, and it ain't because we want to necessarily, right there. It's because we need to. We have to, because if we're good people and good friends, that's what we're going to do. We're going to tell you the truth. And again, I hate that I had to say that. It's something we don't usually talk about in that manner, right? But it needs talked about sometimes, because when we're looking in the mirror, we just don't want to have to look at that person and know that that's who you're looking at. So yeah.
40-foot garbage man. Not the comment that you just left, but the one that you left before that. Let me see. Let me back up here for a second. By servitude to passion, habit is formed, and habit to which there is no resistance becomes necessity. I read that yesterday. I swear to you I did. Or I'm having the worst case of deja vu ever, but I swear to you I just read that. Did you send me that in an email, or did I read that somewhere else? It's not the full quote, but I don't know where I read it yesterday. I don't know what I was reading, but I read that yesterday. That's odd. Well, it's not really odd, because I spent a pretty decent amount of time reading about such things. But yeah, people, you know what? I think Mark's right. There are times that you just sort of have to. There are times you just sort of have to lay it out. We never want to hurt anybody's feelings. We're also not going to sugarcoat things, because it doesn't pay off. It really doesn't. As far as any of it goes, if no matter how long you've been sober or whatever, I think one of my favorite quotes of all time was the Paul Coelho, that the secret of life is, if you get knocked down 7 times, you get up 8. Doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. It doesn't. When Nelson Mandela was given the Nobel Peace Prize after becoming the first, black president of South Africa, he said, "Boy, I hope this isn't for becoming the president. I hope you gave this to me for how many times I got back up after I got knocked down." I really would like to believe that that's what this award is about. And people, that's what life is about, right? It doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. You just got to get up one more time than the number of times you got knocked down. I saw somebody had written in the comment section that says, "I haven't failed." You haven't failed unless you intend to not try again, truthfully, especially in recovery. There's the number of stories of people who made it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and then relapsed. There's no way to count them. I mean, this is something that happens so often, it's incredible. But you know what? If you got 12 years that you spent sober, and then you spend a couple of days stumbling, I mean, how about big picture stuff? How about perspective? The way I'd like to look at it is take 365 days, multiply it by 12, and then take the number of days that you used and do the math that way and say, you know what, it might have been a stumble, but it makes up less than 1% of the last 13 years of my life, or it makes up less than, 0.5% of the last 13 years of my life. I mean, that's not awful stuff. It happens, right? But if you stay down, if you spend the rest of your life drinking, that's awful stuff. If you spend the rest of your life using, it's about getting back up if you get knocked down. And Mark makes a good point that one of the things that I think it's almost a disservice, but it has become such an accepted part of recovery that we know relapse is just such an accepted part that you do come across those cats who'll be like, "Yeah, I'm due for a relapse." I know those guys. I really do. You know what I mean? Like every once in a while, they're just going to go blow it out for a little while, and then they're going to jump back up. Commitment is commitment. Commitment is doing the right thing all of the time, right? And that brings in the integrity and all of that. My hat's off.
I would say this to add to that, Tommy. Commitment is exactly what you just said it was. So when you relapse, but you can relapse and still be fully committed. It's when you relapse and you're not is the problem. Because that's exactly what happens. If you're strong and you're like, "Hey, I'm trying to stay committed, but I made a mistake," and you go back to, trying to do the best that you can. That's the difference. We're not scheduling our relapse a month from now. Unfortunately, people do that in their mind. They don't necessarily have to speak it, but they will think that. If you catch yourself thinking that stuff, get to somebody, something, because you're already starting that road. So anyway, sorry.
Oh no, I think that, and we'll start to get into the witching hour anyway. People don't live the same day over and over again. Don't. One of the beautiful things about sobriety is that you never know what the next day is going to bring. You know, could be the best day of your life. You don't know. And there's something
To be said for that, not knowing, for the adventure of what life is. Because I'll tell you what, when you're using, you damn well know what tomorrow's going to bring. Right? You know exactly what tomorrow's going to bring. It's going to bring misery, it's going to bring suffering, and it's going to bring the chase. Right? The same thing you've been doing. It's probably time to stop. A personal opinion. Take it or leave it. I am Captain Tommy Scoville. Between now and tomorrow night, when we meet back here at the same time in the same place, I want you to do just one thing. Reach out there and try to save somebody. On the other side of the glass, we got
Mark Wages.
Have a good night, people. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless.